My First Million, hosted by Sam Parr and Sean Purry, is brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. My First Million features famous guests like Alex Hormozi, Sophia Amoruso, and Hassan Minhaj, sharing their secrets for how they made their first million and how to apply their learnings to capitalize on today's business trends and opportunities. Sam and Sean recently sat down with Tim Ferriss to talk about his latest lifestyle experiments and how to spend a perfect 24 hours. You can find this episode and listen to My First Million wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, folks. Welcome to the Science of Scaling podcast. I'm your host, Mark Roberge. Today, we're going to revisit one of the most common components of the sales team structure, and that is the commission plan. Because we've covered methodology, we've covered hiring, we've covered org design. We haven't dove in as much here. And I've had the great pleasure of jamming on this topic with Nick Dellis, our guest today. He's the head of revenue at Mercury. And if you haven't heard of Mercury, they raised $163 million at a $1.62 billion valuation with the metrics to back it up, with over 100,000 customers rewriting the rules of banking. Nick is driving that momentum. And when I asked him, what's the commission plan? He said, we don't have one. It knocked me off my chair. And as I unpacked it, I am rewriting some of the framework advice around commission plan design and the science of scaling, and maybe even more. So let's hear from Nick. He might inspire a different way of thinking for you too. Let's dive in. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be diving into commission plan design. It was something that you kind of credit some of the culture and the success there. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we don't have one. We've chosen not to have a commission plan, and that's a really strategic choice for us, given where we are, the kind of team and culture we want to build, and so far it's working really well.
It's crazy. I think the first time I heard of this, but like Daniel Pink, I think, talked about it in his book, To Sell as Human. I think it was probably 20 years ago. Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so I have a pretty unorthodox sort of sales background in that I didn't come from sales. And I worked for a CEO during the sort of financial crisis where I was put on a commission plan, running sort of channel sales at a domain registrar. And what was really interesting was it didn't motivate me. The numbers were big and exciting, but it didn't change my behavior in any way whatsoever. In fact, all it did was give me anxiety. And what I mean by that is, young, married, looking to save to buy a house. And all I could think about was like, how do I hit my number? And so as someone who's motivated by just doing amazing work, period, I'm very competitive. I like to win. I found that the commission plan just didn't work for me. And that anxiety I always remembered that. And so, we sort of played around with it a little bit when I went to Weebly, but then when I sort of got to Mercury, I saw the team that was there in place, and I was like, these guys are motivated just to kick butt.
Hey folks, just Mark here. I bet this is making a lot of people uncomfortable right now because it's always been done like this. But I'm listening to Nick and I'm like, yeah, I kind of see that. Like, what behavior does the traditional sales comp plan drive? It's very short term. And we've already talked about how this leads to rough outcomes like bad revenue, bad customers. Like, it's so obvious why it's happening. Shouldn't they be long-term incented just like the rest of the team? Isn't something like equity a better way to do it? So it is profound thinking, and it's easy to do it how it's always been done. But there's some serious justification here. Let's keep unraveling it.
I just found like it creates the wrong motivation, it builds the wrong culture, and frankly, I never understood why sales teams did it. And I guess that's a function of the fact that I didn't come from sales teams.
Beautiful. Okay, so this has to be unpacked at Mercury, and there's a lot of questions around that. But I want to just double click again, though, into the history and how. So obviously, you had this personal experience where it's like, all right, I'm on a comp plan. This isn't really motivating me in the way that it should. And then you also talked a little bit about using it at Weebly as a leader. Can you unpack that a little more in terms of like, what does Weebly do, and like, what was your role, and like, how'd you use it?
Weebly was a do-it-yourself website, an e-commerce company, and I ran partnerships and channel sales there. And so we were still trying to find product market fit in the channel. And the kinds of people we were hiring were just really passionate, motivated, and like, again, wanted to compete to win. But, the sort of the money was a side effect of that. Like they weren't motivated by making an extra X dollars in a quarter. We were trying to build a business from zero. And so, and again, we hired people who were motivated by Weebly becoming a big company. And so when we started that channel, we created a commission plan. And again, we were incentivizing short-term behavior. Even when we changed the commission plan to sort of incentivize longer-term behavior, it still led to the same sort of, on a playing of games, but that same kind of like, I'm optimizing for my plan. And that's when we scrapped it and decided we're going to goal people just the way we goal product people, right? We're hiring really great people. We're going to pay them competitive salary. We're going to give them meaningful equity. And then we're going to go and kick butt together. And so that worked really, really well. And we also had the right team for it. We had a team that was intrinsically motivated to just win. And so it worked really well. And so when I joined at Mercury, that was a very similar situation. First thing everyone told me is, we need a commission plan. We don't have a commission plan. And I was like, this is the chance to like actually implement it. And so that was 18 months ago. It has worked really well. Again, we're hiring the right people for the plan to work. I don't think it works in every case, but for us, it's been very successful.
So you brought up this point, like product people aren't paid that way. You've probably had a lot of opportunity to reflect on this. You've probably had debates and arguments about this, bucking the trend here. But why do you think when you look at, say, a software company, finance, product, engineering, marketing, customer success usually, HR definitely, they're on just regular salaries with like probably some equity. Sales, no. Base, commission, sometimes a 50-50 split. Why is that?
Yeah, it's almost like every time I've had a conversation about this, the inevitable thing I hear is, it's almost like the treat salespeople like it's some coin-operated machine. I put this in, I create a bunch of motivation that's like related to dollars, and I get this out of it. And if I don't have this incentive plan, then I'm not getting maximum efficiency. And so I think that's how people think a lot about it, right? And they want to think of sales as sort of like a variable cost, right? I want to have as cheap a fixed cost as possible. And then if the team works, I'm happy to pay them extra. And so, the irony of that is like, you would never do that with a product team, right? Could you imagine hiring an entire product team and saying, okay, product team, you're all going to get paid, frankly, crap salaries you can't live on as a base. And then we're going to pay you based on the success of your product, or frankly, how many features you ship, right? Like you would never build a great product organization that way. And I feel like that's, ironically, that's how people want to build a successful sales team, and they consider that success. And so, and those conversations keep happening. There are people at Mercury who are always saying like, when are we doing a commission plan? When are we doing a commission plan? So I think it's a never ending conversation, to be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to kind of frame it, looking at it from the very early days, kind of like one of the first salesperson hires, which I think is a little bit of a different contextual consideration versus scaling the team. So let's start with the first. And I think you kind of had that experience at Weebly. Can you talk about that and why you really felt for that first one or two hires, it was important that we don't use a commission plan?
Yeah. The short answer is you're still trying to figure stuff out, right? I think once you have a commission plan or you have such targets tightly nailed down, you're optimizing for like a local maxima, right? And, I think if you really have a sort of growth mindset, you want to hire the right people who want to go down rabbit holes. And those rabbit holes could be, hey, what is the product perfect for, right? There's probably 20 different ideas. Tremendous amount of time wasted in trying to figure that out.
Yeah, this is a no-brainer for me. Nick has evolved my thinking. I am editing The Science of Scaling because of his influence. I don't think the first sales hire should be on a commission plan. We've often talked about like that first hire is way different than the 10th. Like the first hire, the biggest value they're creating for your company are not the customers or revenue they produce. It's the customer voice. It's the feedback. It's the rapid learning. It's the experimentation and our journey toward product market fit and go-to-market fit. That's the value. And if they're on a traditional comp plan, to Nick's point, their comp is contradicting with their role and their value. Equity does it, just like everybody else. And the North Star is that aha moment or that lead indicator retention or that consistent customer success is what we're going toward. So yeah, this is a no-brainer for me. First sales hire, no commission plan. Let's get back to Nick.
But it's really important time because you're trying to find product market fit. You're trying to find the right customers willing to pay you for their product. And you're trying to find someone who really gets value out of the product and is happy to pay you that money, right? So early on, that's what we spend a lot of time at Weebly trying to figure out, right? Who is the customer that really appreciates this product? Who's the nth customer? Okay, great. We've nailed this segment. We have to go figure out another segment. Anytime you're trying to figure out that nth customer type or segment or ICP or channel even, there's a tremendous amount of sort of work that needs to go into it with an unknown sort of payback. And so I found that when you have a commission plan, it's really hard to get people to do that kind of work, that exploratory work. Some of like, if you think about, venture investing, I talk a lot about S-curves. It's really hard to start the next S-curve from a sales or channel perspective if you don't do that experimentation. And so I always just found like when you tie it, when you have that commission plan, in the back of my head, that's what I'm thinking about as a rep. That was the sort of learning at Weebly. It was like when you're trying to build new markets, when you're trying to find product market fit, you're better off sort of managing performance a different way. And I actually think like that's an important call out. People hear no commission plan and they say, well, how are you managing performance? Right? You manage performance the same way you manage performance with the product person, right? You look at the quality of the work. You still have sales goals. You still have behaviors you want to see modeled every day that build up to hitting sales goals. And so you just, it's just not a blunt instrument. You didn't hit your number, therefore you don't get paid, therefore you're gone, or whatever it might be. It just takes more work, just like managing anyone else.
I was curious about the perception of performance and goals in that early stage, because like you said, like we have to figure this stuff out. We have to experiment. When you are that first one or two salespeople and you're experienced there, are you goaling them on revenue and customers, or are you kind of holding them to a different bar at that stage?
We have sort of a core set of campaigns that I would say are scaling. And then we have sort of new campaigns, right? We're talking about like starting that new S-curve in terms of, sales. So in those instances on the S-curve stuff, we are really trying to learn. So we do not necessarily goal on, customers signed up or deposits that come from certain customers. It's, what are we trying to do? So if we're going after, I make up a new channel, but let's just say we were to go after climate, what do I want to learn over the next quarter? And then I set a goal to maximize what I want to learn over the next quarter. And so that could actually be radically different than the number of customers I sign up.
Give me an example.
It's probably, so let's just say it was climate, right? If I was going after climate, I would say, okay, I assume climate founders hang out in different places than typical Y Combinator SaaS founders, right? So I could go get 10 climate companies to join Mercury, or I could goal on attend 10 events in and around the climate space to help us define what we're going to go figure out next quarter.
I like how Nick is thinking about this in breaking down these measurable outcomes and goals. I'm going to throw out a framing that I learned from Oscar Torres. He's been a friend for quite some time, executive at Dassault Systems, LP at Stage 2 Capital and professor at ESADE Business School out in Barcelona. And he talks about leading activities that lead to leading indicators that lead to lagging indicators that lead to outcomes and goals. And I think that's what Nick is talking about here. And it's a good framework to organize these various metrics. Because ultimately, what is the outcome and goal of a salesperson? It's actually not bookings and revenue and customers. It's the lifetime value they create. Because you could have 2 reps book the same number of sales in a year. But in most situations, there's a significant variance in the lifetime value of those customers. And that variance is created by the salesperson's behavior. So the outcome and goal is lifetime value. The lagging indicator to that is revenue. The leading indicator to that is pipeline generation and opportunity creation. And the leading activities is what Nick is talking about here. How many events do we go to? How many meetings do we book? How many calls do we make? And so you can see how all this is orchestrated in the measurement of a salesperson. And Oscar's framing helps us to organize it to create sense. All right, let's get back to Nick.
But if I'm really trying to figure out a new channel, we will often goal on what it is we think will maximize learning. And so using climate as an example, it may be beneficial. It might be like, go meet 10 VCs in the climate space and figure out what their customers care about.
That makes total sense. Like to implement that on those first couple hires. I have a lot more questions. I don't want to say skepticism, but like devil's advocates, I suppose.
Yeah.
When we think about it at scale, and you've had the opportunity to do that at Mercury. So let's do that at Mercury now. So now you're past a couple of salespeople. Now you're literally in scale mode, adding number 5, adding number 10, adding number 15. There's still no commission plan. Why?
Because it continues to work. And so we may have a commission plan at some point. At this point, we have continued to be able to scale the team and improve our results at the same time. So we're growing the team and we're growing our efficiency as a team at the same time. And so we are finding that as long as that continues, we get more efficient and we're continuing to have success, we'll continue to do that. And we're still finding, to be clear, we're still able to hire really high quality candidates with sales experience who believe in the model. It is harder to find salespeople who believe in this model, but once you find them, almost all of them tell us, holy crap, this has been life-changing. It's like so much more fun to work at sales, to work under this model.
I'm going to try to channel, ironically, all the questions that our sales leaders will be asking right now listening to this. So first off,
okay, yeah.
Doesn't that create sort of an inverse correlation with the best talent in the hiring funnel? Because if I'm like a killer rep that in my last 4 jobs, I was at 250% a goal, and while the rest of the team was making their OT of whatever, 200-300, I was making 700-800, and that's what I want to do next. Don't you lose that rep? And doesn't that mean you lose the best talent out there?
Yeah, so I would say 100%. We've had plenty of conversations with prospective candidates who hear what we have to say, and they're like, "There's no way, right? I want to swing for 120% goal, and I want to make a boatload of money." When I first started 18 months ago, tons of people were just like, "Wow, I'm smashing it," right? Since then, first people to get laid off are sales team. First people to not hit goal and get 0, right? They don't actually hit their plan, right? That happens more often on average. And so you have really good people who don't hit plan, who get laid off. And so I would say one, like now those conversations are way easier to have because people are starting to see that there's actually a cycle in sales, right? The cycle in SaaS or startups is the same one the sales team experiences. You go through periods of, I'm just optimizing to make the most amount of money and I'm going to jump around and do that. And everyone's going to fight for that expensive talent. But then you have moments of people realizing, holy crap, I really am underpaid. Having 120% goal in mind is not useful to paying rent unless you hit the number and you get paid and you have a job at the end. And so I think the short answer is like, yes, at the top level, we do lose out on those candidates, but we have found that we can still get really high quality candidates. Like there's nobody on my team today that I would say, like I can think of anyone externally that would be sort of better. Like I'm not sitting there saying, well, I'm sort of trading something off here.
Are we not attracting the best sellers with this model? If someone's going out and closing 400% of goal every year, are they not going to come here? Probably not. But actually, are they best? Or is it the LTV? And I will tell you, I mean, maybe I'm not working in like traditional businesses as much or whatever, where there is a correlation, but I don't see a strong correlation between the sellers that bring on the most customers and bookings and the sellers that bring on the healthiest customers and the highest LTV. So there could be a flaw in this design at attracting the quote unquote perceived best sellers out there. But are they actually best when we think about the measurement of our sales team? And if we think about best in terms of generating the highest LTV, the most successful customers, is Nick's design optimal to do that? I think so. Let's get back to him.
It is harder work. Recruiting is harder. It takes a lot more time to build up the funnel, to tell the story, to have these kinds of conversations you and I are having. And that's probably the biggest trade-off is, that just takes a lot more work.
I am so intrigued. Like, I think you're onto something huge. And like in like sort of like a why now aspect of like just so much emphasis on culture, different motivations of like the Gen Z, generation that's coming out and joining the workforce now. I think this is huge. So like now the team's there, whatever, there's 20 people. And then you've got one person who's like continually like near the bottom and everyone's like, dude, what the heck? Like they're like making the same as us and not pulling their weight. And then you got another person who like, maybe they did hit 250% last quarter or even last year. And they were like, damn, I would have got paid. So like, how do you deal with those circumstances?
Yeah. So I think the misnomer here, when you think about commission plans, is like, so everyone makes the same amount of money, and if you're a salesperson, and like that's that. Comp has to be thoughtful here, right? So, and essentially our pitch is, would you rather make 75% of what you would have made guaranteed, or would you rather take a swing? And ultimately sort of enough people say, yeah, I'd rather not have that hanging over my head, right? So, but what happens afterwards, right? Exactly right. You join a company, you join Mercury, turns out you're not really good. We manage performance the way you manage performance on any team. You still have goals. And if you don't hit goals, your sales manager will sit down with you and try and make you better. The difference at Mercury is you have a team of other people because we have shared goals, but you have other individuals who are not motivated to like beat you, right? You don't win by beating someone, right? At the end of the day, there's a motivation because there's no commission plan for you to help your counterparts be successful. So one, we often find that if someone is somewhat new or scaling up or not a strong performer, other people in the team are coaching them and trying to bring them up to sort of the team average. Then we have people who kick butt. And like you said, they're at the top. The short answer is they get a higher rating when it comes to annual performances. They get bigger increases. They get more opportunities to work on more meaningful projects. We talked about these multiple S curves. Who do you think works on these new initiatives, right? The people who are really, really like successful and hit their targets and smash their targets. So I guess it's exactly the same way it would work in product. The top performers are compensated, and then the biannual cycle we have, and they get opportunities to work on more stuff, and they get the opportunity to be managers if that's what they want, et cetera, et cetera. So it's no different than product, and I think like that's one of the misnomers is like, well, what happens to top performers? They could make double what they're making with you over there. Saying, well, they will get a bigger increase, more equity than their counterparts.
Makes total sense.
There's no secret formula for better service throughout the customer journey, but there is the all-new Service Hub from HubSpot. It makes it infinitely easier to scale customer support and increase retention. By bringing service and support together in one powerful platform, you can deliver the best experiences for your customers and your teams. Free up time for your reps to focus on complex issues with an AI-powered help desk. Proactively drive retention with customer health scores that keep your business ahead, stopping churn in its tracks. And give your entire go-to-market team the data they need to operate as one unified, powerful front. All so you can easily support, strengthen, and grow your customer base. Secrets out. HubSpot Service Hub is a game changer. Visit HubSpot.com/service to do more for your customers today.
There's other ways besides the variable comp to reward. And that's really what you're leaning into. So if I'm listening, I'm like, I'm going to try this. Nick this is brilliant. So I want to explore some of the resistance that you got, and coach our listeners how to get through that. So starting with just like the idea. I don't know if it was like, I'm sure your CEO was like, wait, Nick, really? Do we want to? Maybe a board member was like, wait, Nick. So can you talk us through what that resistance felt like and how'd you get them on board?
Hear me out, right? So I think one, it's just having the same conversation you and I are having, which is, hey, let's think about it a little bit differently. So say one, make sure you got the right kind of people. If you're building a new team, that's much easier. But if you're if you come into an existing team, then there is that adjustment period that's needed. And often that's what you'll do is you'll take a quarter or two or even a full year and say, okay, we're winding this down. By the end of the year, here's how we're fixing comp, etc. I think the second piece that, we think a lot about is how are you measuring performance without that commission plan? Right. So a lot of time you need to sit down with your finance team and say, okay, finance team freaks out when they hear this one, right? Hey, I thought I had this somewhat cheap workforce that, only made money on the way when they performed. And now I don't. And so a lot of those conversations are difficult. And I think they're probably the most difficult conversations we had here at Mercury was, well, how do we handle underperformance or how do we drive performance? And then honestly, that is one where it really depends on your counterparts, right? So myself on the executive team, head of finance, and we sat down and said, all right, what do you need to know, Dan, in order to be comfortable that we can continue to scale this team? And then, how do I operate within those confines? So, I think there's no shortcut there. It's just talk to your counterparts, make your pitch, understand where they're coming from, and then, you meet often enough that, you're tracking this performance. And that's what happened to us. We start small, we continue, you unlock, and away you go.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people think about commission plan design as downside protection. Ironically, just in the last 2 weeks, I've seen this come up twice in the Stage 2 Capital portfolio. And I don't think it's the right thinking. I don't think the commission plan is there to save you money. God forbid a salesperson doesn't perform. That's what the performance improvement plan and your termination policy does. If they don't perform, they're not going to stay. And okay, fine. You wasted 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of pay. In the long term, that's not going to matter. And it's a rounding error when you think about the variable compensation and how much that would have saved you. So yeah, I'm going to just completely get rid of the downside protection argument. Because to Nick's point, this culture and this design does not ignore the fact that you still have to do your job. And, most high-performing organizations hold a high bar to that. And they don't have 100% retention in any department. From product to finance to HR, we just hire some folks who, they're great people, but they're just not a right fit for our context. And they're moved on. And the same is going to be true to sales in this design. So even though there's not that quarterly commission plan to drive them, there is a high bar for performance. And that mitigates and offsets some of the concerns around creating a softer culture with this design. Okay, let's get back to Nick.
The other thing I would say I've seen happen is a good way to trial this if you have an existing organization is, we talked about those S-curves, which is pick something totally new that is isolated and set goals that are not based on, not commission-driven goals. In fact, that's probably a good hybrid model. If you have an existing organization and it works really well, is, to farm off some of your team to go and focus on that other stuff with a different kind of performance plan.
Yeah, it sounds like a no-brainer on that one. I do a lot of thinking about the overall go-to-market system, and I'm curious about other implications that this strategic decision has on the rest of the system.
I've not found yet, specifically here at Mercury, that the commission plan has had any impact outside of the things you need to figure out anyway. At least on my side. I think probably areas where it bleeds over is, there's less fighting about who owns that customer sign up. But if you think about attribution, it's like probably a good example. The biggest fights I've seen at organizations is like, whose customer is this? Is it marketing's? Is it growth team? Is it like a sign up? Is it the SEO team? I think the benefit of not being so wed to, is this my customer? I signed it up. It's part of my commission. I think part of it is we probably have a little bit more leeway there, and we still want to know where that customer came from. We're not spending a lot of time fighting about it, to the point that I have seen when, there's money on the line, right? And so I think that's probably the biggest implication is it's not a winner takes all game. I guess that's probably the difference here is it's just not a winner take all game. That's true amongst the sales team itself. It's also true amongst the rest of the sort of go-to-market functions, whether that's marketing team or sales ops or myself, or the growth team, et cetera. We're all sort of, hey, if the number's up and to the right, we can fight about whether this is yours or mine. But at the end of the day, we look at the whole pie and say, it's working.
Hey folks, just Mark here. I'm really thinking hard about this implication on the broader go-to-market system. No offense to Nick, like I'm just loving Nick's commentary here. I am learning. This is amazing. I'm like thankful and grateful to him for evolving this. But I think there's something more than he's positioning on the go-to-market system design and the implication of this unique approach on compensation. I have no doubt that it has a huge implication on the hiring profile. He has to stay away from that like coin-operated, short-term focus, quarter-to-quarter seller. They would ruin the culture. And he already alluded to that. I also think it has a huge implication on the typical alignment needs of a sales team with regard to rules of engagement, i.e., that was in my territory, that's my deal. Or I'm not going to help you with that customer because I'm chasing my own quota. Or like the appointment that BDR just set up sucks. Or my customer success managers complain about a crappy account. They should just suck it up and make them happen. I worked my butt off on that one. Those things are going to happen less. I don't really know how that translates into the day-to-day structure, but I can tell you it probably has a huge implication on the culture. The other thing I'm intrigued by is it allows the sales team to take a much longer-term perspective. It allows the sales team to root themselves in lifetime value as opposed to quarterly bookings, and maybe the whole organization. And that's just really healthy. When you have a traditional commission plan, you design it such that salesperson good behavior is rewarded in that quarterly paycheck and bad behavior is rewarded in that quarterly paycheck. We have to pull the long-term outcomes back to their day-to-day activities. And that naturally creates a short-term focus. But by being relieved of this with Nick's structure, we can root ourselves in longer-term and arguably healthier metrics for our organization. That's cool. Let's get back to Nick.
Yeah, if you're paying out commissions, if you think about an organization, if I'm the CFO and I'm paying out a big chunk of commissions every month, right? I want to figure that out like right now because I'm writing checks every month that are expensive to the sales team. The difference at Mercury is like, yeah, we want to figure that out. But as long as the right things are happening, as long as the business is growing, as long as everything looks healthy, that's something we can figure out later, right? You optimize for the business, not, this kind of arbitrary check you have to write every month where, you kind of don't trust the sales team. There's marketing team who wants more money, et cetera, et cetera. That kind of politicking kind of just doesn't exist.
I think it's just human instincts to defer back to how it's been done. And Nick, I just want to thank you so much for pushing the envelope on this. It's something that visionaries like we talked in the beginning, like Daniel Pink, have called out, 2 decades ago. We haven't seen, operational success, and you are really pioneering it. And I think it's needed. I think there's a big why now around the shift in generational desires and the enhancement of corporate cultures. And so I just want to thank you on behalf of the ecosystem for doing this. We're going to continue to watch this story very closely. And thanks for coming on the show and dropping this knowledge with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, that does it for me, folks. I'd like to thank our showrunner, Matthew Brown. Editing support comes from Pizza Shark Productions. Of course, I want to thank HubSpot for Startups and the HubSpot Podcast Network for keeping the audio on. And by the way, if I'm a huge fan of feedback. And so get this, if you're listening on Spotify right now, check your phone, see that Q&A field? That's a direct line to me and our show. So let us know what you think. All right, I'll see you next week.